My name's Dee. I'm going to be the moderator. This is the first time I've moderated a panel. I had spent 20 years in the military, so I've had to moderate incidents with young airmen and stuff, so hopefully that'll lend itself. All right, so with that, I'm just going to have the panelists introduce themselves and their credentials and plug, and then we'll get going.
My name is Eric Swedin. I'm a professor of history at Weber State University. My specialty is history of science and history of technology. I've done a lot of military history, articles and books, and a variety of different things like that. I have never served in the military, though I think 4 times I came this close and made a different decision each time. So I don't speak from personal experience serving in the military, just from the intellectual experience of studying military history ever since I was a wee little lad.
I'm Gordon Frye. I teach history at naval history and various other histories at Naval Base Kitsap in Bremerton, Washington. So I'm an adjunct professor of history for Vincennes University's military extension program. My military experience is I made it to the exalted rank of officer candidate USMC, which about fourth lieutenant, somewhere in there. But I've studied, made a study of history all my life, and although I teach naval history, my love is actually Renaissance history, Renaissance military history. I've written a few essays on that, which are on the net, and then I talk a lot.
My name is Dr. James Young. I have a doctorate in U.S. history, from Kansas State University. And whereas my major professor originally put U.S. history on it, was going to expect you to actually apply for jobs and once you get hired. The majority of my classes, as well as my dissertation, were focused on military history. I also am an alternate history writer. I write an alternate history set in World War II. This is also the point where I'll take since Eric was too gracious not to do it, I will say that he also writes alternate history, and you really should read his book. We had a funny incident the last panel we were at where I did not realize that he was the author of his book. Gushing about this book, he's like, yeah, I know I wrote it. Oh, okay. So my specialties is air power, as well as I can speak naval history to varying degrees. And as a former Army officer, of course, I know grunt. But I will also say that I try not to speak grunt frequently because most of the time I want to choke someone in my own branch. So, and as we get to talking about the art of war, you'll understand why I have some of those opinions.
Okay, before we start, because these guys talk a lot, they're very enthusiastic about the subject matter, which is great. As an audience, how many are here because they want to understand how they could use the art of war towards world building as writers? Okay, who are just here because they want to hear some cool stuff about war? Oh yeah, that too.
It's all
it's not. No, it's not. But
it's all grist for the mill.
Okay.
Who is here because you want to figure out how to make your own empire and conquer the world?
Oh,
Okay.
Wow. That would be a great panel.
Virtual supervillainy. Don't tell people about supervillainy.
So if I may point out, for many years I've wanted to write a book, and if you guys want to take it, it's ideal. It was going to be a nonfiction book on how to be a post-apocalyptic warlord.
I would.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, I have great interest in this.
Warlord on leadership.
That's right.
All right, so I guess the way I'll kind of drive this panel is we're asking questions because there's a lot of in-depth history and experience and knowledge on here. I'll kind of try to just relay comments here and there how it might apply to a world-building aspect. And then the people that are here for Art of War, you're going to get it. I'm not going to have to drive anything. These guys are awesome. Okay, Art of War. Underperforming Wesley Snipes vehicle movie. Come out in 2000. No, that's wrong. Yeah,
It's a pretty decent movie.
How many have read or are familiar with the book, The Art of War? Okay, awesome. Okay, so sometimes when you hear the phrase art of war, it's kind of a dichotomy because you're thinking art, creation, beauty, and war, destruction. What I did when I prepared for this, I actually went and looked up the word art in the dictionary. It's basically the first definition is skill acquired by experience, study, and observation. Okay, so now we have a book written, I think about 300 BC, that's still today relevant to warfare. And I wonder if we can discuss why, what made it an art.
It's incredibly general. That's part of it. You can interpret it almost any way you want to. So people like that.
I agree. I also think that, so the book he's talking about is by Sun Tzu, who was a Chinese writer who had extensive experience by what he was talking about. And we love quoting aphorisms from him because it's really kind of written like aphorisms. And there are other thinkers that we quote, like Clausewitz and Jomini and stuff like that. But I think that you can find, okay, it's like going through the Bible. You can pretty much find a scripture to support whatever you want. And going through Sun Tzu is the same way. And people love to do a Sun Tzu quote because it makes them seem intellectual. And, you know, I can look up stuff on the internet too. And it's actually a short, fast read, though it is one of those things that each of the aphorisms you can actually think about for quite a while and apply in different ways.
Just for anybody that might not be familiar with the book, it's not like a manual as in a how-to, a step-by-step, take these guys from there. It's very, very broad and general concepts. I mean, it's used in leadership. I mean, it actually transcends the subject of warfare itself and goes much larger.
And last week, I picked up the graphic novel version at Sam's Club.
Of course. That's the of course.
I would say to answer the question, and some of you are going to laugh at this, war never changes.
I was wearing my Fallout shirt yesterday. Dang it.
But no, in all seriousness, there is some truth to that quote in that, I mean, the human condition, at least until we run to another species that inevitably is going to will counsel us, there are similarities that are true to all stages of warfare, whether you're talking about sticks and stones, bronze, iron, up to and including nuclear weapons. So that is part of the reason why Sun Tzu has endured is, as mentioned, you can apply a lot of this stuff to everything that you are doing regardless of the technology. The danger you run into is that you have people who quote him, as mentioned, out of context, or don't understand the context of the times that he was fighting in. And it's a very interesting Chinese warfare period where he's fighting, and I won't bog down the panel by getting into it, but definitely, if you're going to look at Sun Tzu, especially for world building, go back and look at him in context. You know, just don't just look at the book and say, oh, that was nifty. When you read him in context, it's even better.
So to define war, I would say it is the imposition of your will through the use of organized violence. And you go like, well, doesn't that imply to gangs? Well, yeah, that's why it's called gang warfare. And wars exist in a lot of different contexts. They're not just necessarily conflicts between nation states or between ethnic groups and such. So again, it comes back to how do you impose your will? How do you win?
It can be violence or merely threat of violence, implied violence, and that's what, like we're talking about the Cold War and the Cuban Missile Crisis. There's an enormous amount of implied violence in that situation. A lot of implied violence. Nobody pushed those red buttons. So the Kennedy administration imposed its will on Khrushchev's administration through negotiation and threats of violence.
One of the great things I came across when I was researching this is war is supporting government decisions by force. That was kind of...
Or politics by other means.
Yeah. Okay, so if you have... Okay, let me step one step back. So on a world building aspect, Sun Tzu is your big picture. I always, when I discuss world building, I always talk about big picture and then drilling it down. So as writers, if you understand the big picture, you can start deriving plot points, things for your story along the way. Now, when you talk about art, you have artists, you have art periods. Let's apply that to war. Who are some of the good artists that were able to apply concepts of Sun Tzu and use them effectively? And even if you know some that didn't.
Well, I'd like to say that although Renaissance stuff, and there's lots of really cool Renaissance art about war, one of the best places to look for art dealing with war is in the World War I and post-World War I period. Because there is there were an enormous number of people involved, some of whom were really good artists, or became that. And art in a more broad term, not merely drawing or painting things, but also the written arts. Like Hemingway is a really, really good example of that. He said that all the good writers were killed during the war, and it took a while for the survivors to learn how to write. But they still had that experience within them. And all you got to do is, if you just the visual arts, you just go on the internet and just plug in World War I art. Oh my word. There's some inspiring stuff, some of which looks kind of hackneyed to the modern eye, and a lot of it is just absolutely horrific. So that is a really good place if you want to do some world building, especially post-apocalyptic world building. You just delve into the trenches for a while. By the way, I want to do a plug for a great movie that came out recently. It's called... No, actually.
The joke from the last
panel. They Shall Not Be Forgotten by... They Shall Not Grow Old. That's it. They Shall Not Grow Old by Peter Jackson, who did, of course, the Lord of the Rings stuff.
It's a documentary.
Yes. Kinda. He uses original footage and original interviews, and that's all. It's astonishing. So if you want to do some in-depth into what war is like, you watch that and you come away stunned.
Are there military figures that also would be considered artists and how they applied the art of war?
Well, the Italians in the 15th century and early 16th century, the condottieri certainly thought they did. Making a joke of which art of war book are we talking about? Because Machiavelli wrote a very good book called Arte della Guerra, Art of War, which I think is actually a little better than Sun Tzu's, in that he's actually dealing with some more nuts and bolts. Of course, nuts and bolts for the early 16th century is going to be a little different, but you're still dealing with infantry, armored cavalry, and artillery, your combined arms, trying to figure that mess out. We just sort of improved the technology.
Is that the same Machiavelli that wrote The Prince?
Yes, same guy, Niccolo Machiavelli. And these condottieri, the Italian mercenaries who worked for the various city-states, and they would switch sides. It didn't matter because, this is all just a game, at least between the Italian city-states. And then in 1494, the King of France at the time, Charles VIII, I think so, decided to invade because he wanted to do a crusade and to rescue the Holy Land. And of course, in order to do that, he felt he had to capture the Kingdom of Naples and Sicily first, which he had a very vague claim to. Anyway, so he invaded Italy, which didn't go over well with the Italian city-states. He did what he wanted. He conquered Naples and Sicily, took it from Ferdinand of Aragon's cousin, Ferrante, and then marched back to France. So the Italian city-states, they ditched 200-year wars to ally and put their best condottieri up against these Frenchmen. And at the Battle of Fornovo, the Italians set up this perfect ambush. It was perfect, except the French didn't think that way. And the Italians had all their armored cavalry set up and their infantry, and the French come up with their armored cavalry and their Swiss infantry, which they hired, and they just plastered the Italians. They just went through them like a hot knife through butter. The Italians weren't used to the idea of actually killing each other. There was one battle, and the Italians, one guy died because he fell off his horse and drowned. But it was still a great battle. The French didn't fight that way. Their idea of a good fight was to slaughter as many of the opposition as you could. In fact, the French used heavier lances. Okay, this is knights in shining armor stuff still. The Italians, well, after the French broke their lances against the first batch of Italians, the cavalry they ran into, they had their servants running to pick up the discarded lances that the Italians had left behind. And they discovered these aren't made out of ash, they're made out of poplar. They're worthless. What the heck? This is all just stage show. So, and when the Italian commander, after the defeat, sends his herald to the King of France to ask for, how much is the ransom for our uncles and nephews and cousins and stuff, the French say, oh, sorry, we killed them all. What? You guys are barbarians. Literally, they said, the Transalpine barbarians from France. So the art of war, you can be the best artist at war that you know, but if the other guy doesn't play the same ball game, it goes differently from what you expect. So anyway,
so when you think of the great generals in history, most of them have a real reputation for a reason. If you look at Napoleon, his Italian campaign, which was the first time that he was in charge of an army, and he just trashed the Austrians and the Italians. He was very successful. This is in the 1790s. The reason he was so successful is because he had traveled over the same area, that the battles were fought over in northern Italy, and he was very aware of where everything was and how far away things were. And so when he launched his campaign, he's moving his army so quickly that he is inside the decision loop of his adversaries. This is how the American military teaches its soldiers to fight now, is try to be within the decision loop. That means you're moving faster and the enemy is always reacting to you. You're never having to react to the enemy. Now that works really well in conventional warfare. It's a lot harder to do in irregular warfare, which is what the United States has primarily been tormented by. I'll give you another example. The Battle of San Jacinto, which is the battle by Sam Houston leading the Texians against the Mexican army. Santa Anna's army, Mexican army. The Texians are severely outnumbered, and they launch an attack by complete surprise and win the battle at the cost of very few soldiers. And so there are these principles of war: surprise, superior intelligence, acting within the decision loop.
Well, they literally caught Santa Anna with his pants down. Well, literally, I mean, he was with the Yellow Rose of Texas at the time, and so it was I'm sorry.
No, that's a very good example, and but. For world building, one of the things that you can do is you can try to replicate the stuff that we hear about from the Renaissance or from World War II or the Napoleonic era. So why don't we look at something that's actually a little more interesting. So let's look at the Aztec Empire. Because the Aztec Empire has a religious system that is sustained by regular blood sacrifices to the sun god. So they engage in regular warfare to the cities around them, and the goal of the war is not to kill the enemy. The goal of the war is to capture enemy soldiers. And so they're fighting with a device. It's a curved weapon that has inset into it obsidian. And so the goal is in the war to strike a person, rip across the back of their leg, and hamstring them. And so you've all seen a football player that pulls an hamstring. They're like limping around going, ow, ow, ow. Well, now they just captured, the Aztec warrior just captured someone, and the ultimate goal to reach the highest status of being an Aztec warrior is to have captured 4 enemy. What are the enemy brought back for? They're kept as prisoners, and then they are sacrificed to the sun in a very horrible human sacrifice thing. But it's interesting because you have a war in which, in some ways, the Aztecs are literally predators. And they don't want to conquer these places. They don't want to have possession of these places. They just want you to be weak enough that they can go and take your people. So it's like Stargate Atlantis against the vampire critters that I can't remember the name of them.
The race.
The what?
The race, I think.
Was it the race?
Race.
Race. Yes, you're correct.
Race, yeah.
Or you look at the Incan Empire, before Pizarro came along, the Inca Empire had this really bizarre system that was not sustainable. Every time someone became king, their goal was now to conquer new lands so that those new lands could be given to nobles and they could support your tomb, your mausoleum. And once that was permanent, and those lands were now permanently assigned to supporting your mausoleum. So every new king had to conquer more lands in order to support their mausoleum, which is a way to keep the nobility in power, but more importantly, it creates a system of continuous warfare. And you're going to run out of land.
To answer the original question with the artists, as far as we're talking practitioners, I'm sitting here jotting notes. Basically, just when I say tactical, operational, strategic, everybody know what I mean. The 3 levels of war. I think that because tactical starts at the platoon level, operational is about where you get to you're moving these or units up to the size of brigade, or depends on who you ask, division. So 3 to 10,000 people, strategic, of course, nation states, what their plans are. And the way that goes, world building, and I'm getting around to the answer to the question, is that you have to, when you're writing your book, you have to decide, where am I focusing my lens, and will this change as the book goes on? Classic case in sci-fi, David Weber. Honor Harrington starts off as, she's a master of a ship, and then you have a very narrow lens. By the time we get to the end of the series, we're talking entire solar empires at war, spanning thousands of light years, and as you can tell, the focus changes as well as does how the practitioner of war goes. So to answer your question about artists, I would say tactically Wellington, operationally Nimitz, strategic Marshall. And I mention those 3 names because if you look at them, they're a product of their time. And also you can get some world building ideas from how they went about the conduct of war based on where your lens is at. So in the case of Wellington, the defeat of Napoleon and everything else, if you look at his campaign at Waterloo, the way that he ran that campaign at the tactical level, bordering on the operational, is something that you could almost write 1 or 2 novels about. It's been done, but you could, depending on your technology and everything else. Operationally, Nimitz, you have the whole spanning of the Pacific, and how he sets about or enacting war plan in to defeating Imperial Japan. Strategically, Marshall, he doesn't get nearly enough credit for how well he runs and manages the army, and also directly influences the war effort with his relationship with his naval counterparts. These are all things where you don't want to do strict analogies, because if you're writing sci-fi or whatever else you're doing, you want to file out the serial numbers, and that's how you can go about doing some of the world building.
If I can riff off of what Eric said a minute ago about the Aztecs, it was one of my favorite subjects. Okay, just
yes, they ate them too.
They ate them too.
What else do you call them?
That's right. These were called the Flowery Wars. Okay, so I'm going to go down this little rabbit hole. The Flowery Wars is primarily between the Aztecs and the Tlaxcalans. And it was practiced on both sides. I mean, the Tlaxcalans were more than happy to nab Aztec soldiers or warriors and execute them too, to the same gods. But what is interesting is, if you want to get into world building, is the reason that, and I'll go further with this, but the reason that Cortez won with his, supposedly 800 Spaniards and 16 horses, well, it was actually more like 1,600 Spaniards and 40 horses, and 25,000 Tlaxcalans. Okay, that's the little number that people forget to put in there. But because of this alliance between Cortez and the Tlaxcalan city-state nation, Spain continued to use these Tlaxcalans as sort of their bully boys, their frontmen for their imperial expansion of New Spain, what's now Mexico. And in fact, the oldest, quote, European, end quote, building in what's now the United States is the Tlaxcalan Church in Santa Fe. Okay. Built by Indians, for Indians, but it's the oldest European building. And furthermore, there's some really cool paintings done on buffalo hide. They're called the Segesser hide paintings from the German priest that collected these, but they were done in around 1720 or so. And they one depicts an imperial war between Spain and France in like Kansas, okay, using proxies for the most part, using the Pawnee and Oto on one side, and the Spaniards have their mostly Pueblo Indians on the other side, and it's the Villa Sur expedition. The other one, however, depicts, and I was on the what do you call it, the group that was discussing is trying to figure out what these were, so I'm very proud of that. It was a painting of a group of mounted soldiers attacking an Indian village. And they knew that these were Lipan Indians, Lipan Apaches, because when the archaeologists said, oh yeah, well, the Lipans were the first ones using teepees. They sort of spread the idea of a true teepee. And you can look in the door of that teepee there and you see Lipan pottery. Okay, so we know these are Lipans, and we know that it was done by somebody who's probably there. I don't say horsemen because they weren't horsemen, they were mounted soldiers. These guys are on mules, and the mules are armored in leather, heavy, rawhide leather armor, as are the soldiers. The soldiers had swords and lances, helmets built like a headdress, and friggin' Tlaxcalan feather headdresses. These are Tlaxcalans being used in an imperial war by the Spaniards against other Indians out on the plains. This is 1720. The reason that they were mounted on mules, and the reason I knew they were mules, is because to have a saddle on a mule, you need to have breast strap and a crupper, the strap that goes back to the horse's tail. Okay, because horses have withers, shoulders. Mules do not. They get around. If you don't have the stuff to support it, you go, woo. Anyway, and the Spaniards made sure that no Indians rode horses. They could ride mules. Women, priests, and Indians rode mules. Only white men rode stallions. Anyway, the use of, and we've talked about this on other panels too, the use of proxies in imperial wars is important. That's how, as Dr. Swedin was talking about in Cuba, Eric. That's how Eric was mentioning in the Cuban Missile Crisis. We and the Soviets agreed to use proxies for our wars. We had proxies that we were fighting in Vietnam, and the Russians, we used proxies against the Russians in Afghanistan. We weren't going to actually fight them head on. So using proxies is something that people don't generally consider when thinking of these imperial wars. But it's actually a vitally important thing that isn't really touched on a whole lot.
I'm going to bounce off the proxy things. I think it's kind of interesting. There's the phrase that you can lose the battle but win the war.
Yes.
Let's talk about, is that relevant, derived from Sun Tzu? And I mean, that kind of fits some of the proxies, because if you send proxies out and you lose, you still kind of wiped your hands clean, bad pigs.
Well, Gia, General Gia, the North Vietnamese Army, when an American officer said, well, we won every battle, he said, yes, but that's irrelevant.
Yeah, it's famous quote, we won every tactical engagement. The full quote is, we won every tactical engagement, and Giap famously replies, well, factual, that is truly irrelevant to the outcome of this war, because as they're negotiating the end of the peace or the Americans getting out.
Absolutely.
There's other example, I'll just go ahead and go with the question. War is, with the whole politics of other means, and this is, the other famous philosopher here quoted is Clausewitz, where, as I refer to him, the dead Prussian who needed an editor.
Yes.
The thing where you have with the Clausewitzian theory as well as Sun Tzu is that you should have and this goes back to levels of war also, you should have a strategic reason for going to war. Whether you blundered into it or not, there should be a strategic driver. The strategy drives your doctrine, it drives your acquisitions, it drives how you organize your force. So if you have a force where I can lose every battle, but because of geography, or because of the fact that, wow, I lost every battle, but yet I still outnumber you 30-1, so guys, we can keep killing until you're tired of it, but you're not going to affect anything. These are all reasons why you don't have to necessarily be, and when you do the world building, you can go with that with like an alien species that's just like, oh, golly gee, you just smoked 5 billion of our species. Unfortunately, we won't go to the decimal point, but there's a lot of us, not a lot of you. You can use that as part of your world building. And there's also some, Harry Turtle's alternate history series where he has aliens come to us during World War II.
In the balance?
Yes, that's part of what covers that. is that they have both a gestation period and a technological, period of advancement where Harry Torres does that masterfully, where he's puts that into the world build where that affects strategic decisions. I mean, the race shows up, they've got the gravity well, they've got nukes, they've got higher technology. None of this matters because at the tip of the spear, the organizing force starts running out of speech or lizards real quick. Then there's the whole ginger addiction that doesn't help. But these are all things that you can throw into your world building as far as when you're building your wars and your military, is that the size of the better technology and even the better generals doesn't necessarily win, because planning has a quality all of its own.
Wasn't it also that they couldn't replace their supply, not just their people, but their supplies too?
Yeah, that's what I mean with and we'll probably get the logistics later. Yeah. But that's the whole thing, is that as you're doing your world building, one of the things you ask yourself before you embark on this military, whatever time limit or time zone or time period, right, everything you're doing it in, ask yourself, what are the limitations I want to put into place as an author from the get-go? Because the worst thing that you can do to yourself is try to change things midstream. You will rip your hair out, you'll be very upset, and your readers will probably call you on it.
If I could take it a little differently, there's an author who's very, very, very well known, Naomi Novak, and she has dragons set during the Napoleonic Wars, and I only read the first novel, and I really enjoyed the Jane Austen meets, Horatio Hornblower, so to speak, and I loved it. And then the climax of it is the French in their dragons launch an invasion of England, and there's a big battle, and then it doesn't go the way the French want, so they all leave. And so that's supposed to be a climax of the book. So I have never read another word of her book because I will never forgive her for writing a battle scene, again with dragons. You're like, it's all fantasy. No, military principles. And she makes the French into wimps that you don't, for anyone who knows military history or understands military strategy, the battle is so unbelievably stupid it hurts. When you are invading an alien shore, you expect casualties. You just keep on going. And you keep on going. And you don't say, oh, this is so hard. We're going to go home. I'm inarticulate because I'm so pissed off. Still. And it's been like 15 years since
And from a world building aspect, one of the famous phrases just in writing is you have to know the rules to break the rules. So if you have the concept, again, I preach a big picture of war, and as you drill them down, you know the rules, you can find ways to break those rules for conflict, world depth, things of that nature. So, I'm going to move on to an interesting. I was reading something and was talking to you about it, the mythic view of war versus the sensory view of war. So, Art of War game, big picture, that's how generals perceive work with war. What about the person in the trenches, the person that has to pull the trigger? Where does this art of war come into play for them?
So one of the best things that was ever said to me, in the Army, they send you to basically the basic course, the advanced course, and they'll send you to CGSC, and then they'll send you to the War College. So there's a progression of military education in the Army. One of the best things that my advanced course advisor said, or instructor said to all of us was, never forget that the order you are writing, because in the Army, most of the captains write most of the orders, so planners and everything else. Never forget that the order that you are writing has to be executed at 3 o'clock in the morning, in the middle of a driving rainstorm, when it's darker than a cow, by a soldier with an IQ that may be only about 10 points above room temperature. I have never forgotten that. I mean, I used to write orders both as when I was in the Army and also when I do orders for scenarios that we had that people would train on. The thing that you have to understand is that the person who is, when you're doing this and you're right in your world building and you're setting a war, is that at the sharp end of the spear, there is going to be some alien person, whatever, who is having to do this in discomfort, in deep mortal fear of their life, because we're not playing, we're not playing volleyball, we're at war, and who is going to have incomplete information. You will never have someone who has total, well, you should not have, because it's usually, even with, no matter what your communication system is, no matter if you have faster than light communication and everything else, you have what they call Clausewitzian friction, which is, if you hear the phrase fog of war, that's also a Clausewitzian thing. Friction is where basically you have the two sharp ends meeting and all the bad stuff is happening and nobody knows what's happening down there at the end. One of the gross examples of it is World War I. You had generals giving orders on the telephone where the guy at the sharp end, who's basically just watched half his battalion get gunned down, is like, wait, you don't understand. I have no battalion left. I cannot launch a counterattack. And oh, by the way, the Germans don't seem to be running out of machine gun bullets anytime soon. Could I please stay in this trench? No. You've been given your order. You will attack, or I will, we will send someone down to relieve you, and your deputy will attack. And if he doesn't do it, we'll put both of you up against the wall. The third guy is definitely going to do it. The Battle of the Somme, if you read about it, is a comedy of errors of basically that initial attack, not realizing that, whoa, okay, those machine guns are effective. Our artillery does not seem to have done what it's supposed to. Maybe we shouldn't send a second and third wave.
Gee, we just lost 60,000 guys.
And what was it? In about the space of 2 hours. And that's a prime example of friction. I mean, 60,000 people, that's a good-sized city.
Yes.
Dead. And the generals have no clue that this is going on, the bloodbath that's ensuing, because your communication methods are so far behind that they think that, oh, I still hear firing, that must mean we're being successful. No, there's some German up there saying, Hans, I think we need to throw a bucket of water on the barrel. This is starting to get a little warm.
Also, I want to point out that you go to war with the army you have, not the one you want.
I'll try not to twitch it.
And that. The corollary to that is the old saying that if you have a squad of soldiers or Marines, you leave them with a 500-pound rock for an hour. When you come back, it'll either be lost or broken.
Right.
Lost, broken, or practical.
Well, that's right. Okay. So, like you said, you've got all these troops who are somewhere above room temperature and IQ. A lot of them are really, really smart and just don't want to be there. A lot of them love being there, but they're kind of rare and you're kind of afraid of them. But it's just, how to explain this? You are, you're destined to work with what you got. And you have to have your orders written based on what you've got, what they can do, the weapons you have. And if you give these guys the order to go over the top and attack these machine guns and rapid fire artillery, we're going to use cavalry against rapid fire artillery. Well, that's the real killer of World War I's rapid fire artillery. Where guys were, there was battles in which half the participants were artillerymen, not infantrymen. Because that was the huge killer. But it took a while for that stuff to catch up. So, I don't know where I was going with this. Save me, Eric.
Let's go to technological differences. It is true that technologies dictate tactics. And you can look through, as you read the history of war, you can see how tactics change because of that. I'm going to recommend some books, and the next half when we talk, I'll have a list of, I'm making a list of science fiction authors I think do a good job of doing it. But one of the books I would recommend, and this is going to sound really gross, it's called, oh man, now that just slipped my mind. I'll have to look it up. Anyway, it is a book, the book is called On Killing.
Oh, Dave Grossman.
Yes. Yes.
He also did one called On Combat.
On Killing.
Yeah.
And like on war, etc.
It's that what he is he was a U.S. Army officer, ranger, who was also a psychologist. And he changed my thinking about a lot of things.
What was the author again?
David Grossman.
David Grossman. It's called On Killing. And basically said a couple of things, and I'll explain some of them. First of all, he said that people need to be trained in the act of killing if they're going to kill. Most people are really crappy at it. Human beings don't like to kill. And a perfect example of it is one of the best ways to actually disable anyone is to go for their eyes. Almost no one, even if at mortal risk, will go for the eyes. There is something about the eyes that we won't touch them. And you're going, if someone's after you, you jam your thumb into their eye and you pull. And not only do you want the eyeball to come out, you want to keep on driving down into their brain. And if most of you don't find that really gross, well, I hope I haven't helped you become a serial killer. But another thing is when people get in knife fights, their inclination is to slash, not thrust. There is something in the human psyche that says the act of penetration of thrusting feels wrong. And so, fortunately, that's why most knife fights are not, in fact, deadly, because slashing just makes big scratches. And you go back and you look at the Roman army, and the Roman army fought with short swords, and all their troops were trained to thrust, because the thrust is the killing blow. And he also argued that...
Is that the same with swords? With longer swords?
Rapier?
No, see, the problem with the longer sword is designed to engage in swordplay and combat, and the short sword is you are in a line. You're protecting each other with your shields, and you want to thrust. You want to thrust. You don't want to engage in swordplay, which I'm sorry, that looks really cool in a movie. You want to
It depends on your period. Mm-hmm. So in your Renaissance, the long sword was a thrusting weapon.
Yes.
And because the Italians who developed the art of the rapier, it concluded that more people die from a thrust than from a slash. And therefore, we train them hard because of this reluctance to thrust. There's a great English author, George Silver, who he hated that. He said, you guys are a bunch of idiots because you can both die in the fight because both guys can thrust and kill each other and perish right there. So he taught the art of the basket-hilt broadsword where he said, go ahead and thrust, I'm going to cut your arm off. I dare you. But that was a more defensive concept. But as far as actually killing people,
Coming back, I agree that different periods are different ways, but the main purpose of having a long sword is to keep the sharp thing away from you so that combat takes place at a greater distance. Just to give you a historical example, Boudica, who was a real person, raised up a revolt against the Romans.
Battle of Watling Street, I think is what it was called.
Yeah, I don't remember the name of the battle. It's very possible that's the name of the battle. But what happens is they're slaughtering the Romans, and the Romans have a last stand, and the Romans are heavily outnumbered. But the Romans have tactics, they have discipline, and they have lots of Britons with longer swords coming towards them. So what they do is they get in a situation where it's like a funnel. And you have trees on both sides, and the Romans are sitting here, and they're in their formation, and they've got their war machines that can throw darts and throw arrows. And here comes the Britons, and they're like, hey, there's a lot more of us. And so they just rush. And as they rush, they get compressed. And when they get to the Romans finally, they're too close to each other. They can't swing their swords, and the Romans slaughter them. And just and then break their way forward, and that is the end of the rebellion.
Which is like crazy.
Arrows.
With arrows, but it was still a funneling.
It was. You have the funneling effect, and then we can talk about the Battle of Cannae. What it is you use the psychology of the soldiers against them. And it was very effective. But coming back to on killing, the other thing that he talks about in it is that not only do you have to teach people how to use bladed weapons correctly, you have to teach people how to kill with other types of weapons. Because a person will stand in a line and accept the danger and shoot the enemy. But a person may not try to kill the enemy. And he showed historical studies that was something that wasn't happening until the American military figured this out after World War II, and they started changing their training techniques so that people with gunfire would actually not try to shoot over or shoot in the direction of, would actually try to engage in killing shots. Interestingly enough, crew serviced weapons, like 2 people or 3 people using a machine gun, they distribute the moral consequences of their acts, and crew service weapons were extraordinarily deadly because they tried to kill people. It's a fascinating book, highly recommended. By the way, he hates with a purple passion first-person shooter games because he feels that people are being trained to kill without the discipline that comes from military training. And he's got some pretty good arguments there.
You had a great follow-up on combat, too.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree.
We're at the halfway point. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say when he talks about the training, because one of the things I do is I work with training when I'm with the Army, but no, he's not kidding with the fact that everything from the E-type silhouette, which is basically the various type silhouettes that look like a humanoid, to we scored, when we do qualifications, you have to shoot so many out of a certain target. It's designed to get to the point where, even though you have an automatic rifle, you do single shot, is to get you to the psychological, when you represent with a target, you're going to shoot it. Now, of course, once you get to the sharp end, things get kind of weird because someone's trying to kill you. But this is another thing that you have to look at for world building is, what is the morals of killing of my species or of my humanity? Because you can train humans to kill very, very effectively, as has been illustrated. And how do we look at killing in the military sense as far, and again, it's another thing you have to stay consistent with throughout your series. You can have a race of mindless Spartans, but you better darn well explain how you get there and what the ramifications of that are on society. I mean, I think of Timothy Zahn's Cobra series, if anybody's familiar with that, as an example of what you do he does a very good job of explaining how they do that with his people.
And I think the term moral consequences is spot on when you're discussing that thing.
When we mentioned training, if I can jump on that, there's a difference between a soldier and a warrior, and that mostly is training. Napoleon said that one Mameluke, the Egyptian warriors, could defeat 3 French cuirassiers, but 100 cuirassiers could ride through the entire Mameluke army because of discipline and training. That's what.
Are we going to take a 2-minute break?
I was going to take questions. Do you guys need a second?
No, I didn't know. It's kind of weird to have a 2-parter, so I just...
What I was going to do, since it's the halfway point, I didn't want to get too much further down the road, but maybe open it up, take a couple questions. I don't want to take a lot, unless the questions take us down a road that we're going to go. We'll do that, and then we'll kind of get back into the panel mode of it. Go ahead.
So you talked about the difference in like say slashing and stabbing, all the training and discipline. So when you stab, it doesn't take a lot of energy, but when you start swinging, which is why the Romans never did it, because you can't fight all day long swinging like that. How do you train and discipline somebody to not overexert themselves, like in a Call of Duty FPS where you're sprinting and killing? You can't do that.
Repetition.
But even
How do you training though to keep people together and not to overexert themselves so that you have a hole in your life?
Well, first of all, you have to teach them, and they have to believe in the fundamental level that the worst tactic is running. Because in most ancient battles, the place that dying always happens is when you run away from battle. Standing and fighting is your best shot for survival. And that's why veteran troops were so effective and rarely broke and routed. Green troops that would often run because your instinct is, we're not going to win, and if I can run faster than my fellows, I have a chance of surviving. And that may be true, but that's when the horsemen ride you down and kill you. And because if you really want to kill people, the back is the way to go. waiting for them to turn around and make it mano a mano, that's ridiculous. Your job is to kill. Your job isn't to... Now, that being said, there are cases where individual combat, that's where all the honor comes from. But even societies that emphasize that kind of honor, like, say, the Sioux, they had no problem killing people from the back, or unarmed people, or women, or children, because even though they had an honor system, they understood that fundamentally it's imposing your will on the enemy.
There's a saying that Frye mentioned that about the back. There's one of the sayings that kind of, aphorism, if you're in a fair fight, your tactics suck. And that's actually pretty much that covers that, is that, the thing I always think about with, when they talk about ancient battles, is the battle, you mentioned Kenai, and also before it, I always mispronounce the lake's name, Lake Tripolaine, is it Tripolaine? Hannibal's first fight with the Romans. So basically, what ends up happening in both those cases is Hannibal knows the Romans well enough that he sets up situations where he actually uses Romans' discipline against them. And he gets them into confined terrain. And then he manages, and he also uses their preconceptions about his own force against them. And he gets them to make tactical decisions that eventually end up with as I like to call it, 70,000 Romans in a box. And to go to your overexertion, you have serious casualties among the Carthaginian forces. Like there's a certain percentage of their casualties, I say serious, as in their casualties, not relative to the whole casualties of the battle, because both of them are lopsided beatdowns. A large number of the Carthaginian casualties are people who literally overexert themselves in the heat and everything else. They have a whole bunch of heat casualties because they're so busy killing Romans. And by the end of Cannae, the Romans cannot defend themselves because they are so tightly packed, they can't even move their arms. And they're basically just sitting there like, well, okay, it looks like you're about row 3 and I'm row 5, so I have about 20 minutes to make my peace with the gods before the Carthaginians are going to be here to stab me. And it's, I say that sarcastically, but that's about where you're at.
So if I can say this, touched slightly on cavalry, and one of the main reasons, certainly from the mid-17th century on, for cavalry was literally to run down the infantry, fleeing infantry. And if I may be indulged in a personal anecdote, actually running down fleeing infantry.
What time period was that the case where they would train cavalry basically just to pursue fleeing, all the time?
Consistent always existed for cavalry. By this point, that's their primary purpose because you're going to die otherwise.
Charging, you don't charge.
Charging well-formed infantry squares tend to end well.
So when I was in an earlier life, I did a lot of movie work on horseback, and I had the honor of being in command of the British cavalry in the film The Patriot. And so they, so I was one of the bad guys, which is always great, but there was the scene that we were supposed to do was we're supposed to ride through this gap in a hedge and make some intricate turns that the director thought we could do, and then do another, basically call troopers left and charge and chase down the American Patriot infantry. Things went poorly when the cues got misset, and also they blew up some pots of peat moss in front of us. And I was one of the leads, but the guy who was supposed to be, who was the stunt double for the Tarleton, they called him Tabington, but it was Master Tarleton, went right off in front of his horse, and he went that way. And so I'm in the lead, and I can't see anything. I've got reins in one hand, a sword in the other, and I'm hoping my horse knows where he's going. And we go bombing through, and they had also miscued the British infantry to do their charge, which is supposed to be after we get through. So I've got about 50 guys behind me on horseback, and we're at a dead run. And we come flying in, and instead of doing some curves, we just boom. And I open my eyes to see a red coat in front of me going like that. Where'd he go? And all these other guys, and they're carrying their muskets with steel bayonets on them. And I'm using my rubber sword to try to deflect these things. I was like, oh, what the heck? This is fun. Whack! Whack! And, okay, here's the Yankee infantry. But I had a bunch of Southern working for me, so I just called them Yankees. And tell you what, when you hit a guy at a dead run, he's running in front of you, and your horse hits him, he goes down.
Yep.
Or he bounces off that direction. You don't really have much of a chance. Jack Hayes of the Texas Rangers during the Mexican-American War, he said, "Let the bone and muscle of your horses be your weapon." And that is absolutely true. The horse is a weapon. And for running down fleeing infantry, man, they are dead meat.
I'm sorry, anyone who's ever been around a horse charging towards you, there is only one instinct. That is the flee. Because they are really big. And people are really, really slow.
And you can feel the ground move, shake when you get a full charge. I've done some really cool charges. In Rambo 3, we had 200 guys doing a charge across this field, and the guys on the other end were like, "Oh my God, you should have seen that." Well, I couldn't from my view, but anyway, so the impact of the horse I'm getting off on a wild tangent here, but the impact of cavalry on battles was enormous. But unless you're using armored cavalry in the first place, you wait, you hold back. You gotta hold back. And once your enemy's infantry has started to shake a little bit and move, that's when you send in the cavalry and they break and run and then you stop.
And I was going to say that has not changed until you got to turn to the question. Pursuit is still where you make your money. I mean, when you look at the great battles of World War II and everything else, war, if we could have perfected pursuit on the operational level, the war would have ended in 1944. When the German army gets broken in France, and you have the breakout of Calais.
Wasn't that what Patton wanted to do? He wanted to pursue.
Not just but yes, that's the thing. I mean, you have this all going on. The war would have ended because the Western Front would have caved in. Now, the difference with it is that when you start getting to the operational level, horses never really got to the point where they did like an extended pursuit. Unfortunately, when you're doing armor, for some reason, tanks want gas, and that's where the fun starts.
Okay, quick trivia question or fact: only one of us on this panel has an IMD entry. I went and looked it up. Like, what? Okay, I want to backtrack to the Hannibal thing.
But I have a Wikipedia entry.
I put one on there and it took it off, saying I did not merit. I felt so bad that day. I wanted to cry. Okay, I'm going to go back to Hannibal, and I tie it into the larger context of this art of war. So basically what you brought up was Hannibal was very adept at executing concepts from the art of war.
Yes.
But he was defeated, and I only know this because I was doing research on another project, by Scipio Africanus was the only person to defeat him. Can you speak to that?
I would argue Cincinnatus defeated him too.
Okay.
But, until his final battle, Hannibal wins all these battles. He loses the war. And that's a great example of
when every battle loses the war.
Yeah.
And I would say it's a case of, as I'm fond of saying, I see the hand of Budge. Let me just last bit out. Hannibal is a prime example of you can be a tactical and operational genius and you can work for strategic idiots.
And also, the worst thing that can happen to a country is to have a military genius, because these guys are perfect, except nobody knows what they're doing and they can't back them up. So you've got like Robert E. Lee and Napoleon and Hannibal and these other guys who were just brilliant, but they lost.
I'll go with Lee after this question.
Go ahead.
Isn't the reason Hannibal lost his opponent Fabian is why we have the term Fabian strategy?
Yes.
Because he let him out.
Absolutely.
And on the long term.
And that was also complemented by the fact that the Carthaginians could not figure out a strategic plan to get the Italian city-states that were kind of loosely aligned with Rome to decide, okay, yeah, we're totally going to throw them with the Carthaginians.
And Hannibal couldn't take Rome. He wasn't positioned to take it, to do a siege.
Because of Fabian's keeping his army intact.
And he couldn't get in order to take a city, especially back in those times, you had to be able to, you have to do siege or you have to do storm. There are no other options. Not enough in the storm, or not enough allies. Well, I count that as kind of siege.
Yeah.
Well, storm, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, not enough allies, not enough men to do either of those options. Now, with the whole Robert E. Lee, I always say Lee is highly competent, but Lee I do not put in a genius level simply because when you're basically facing the Keystone Cops, when you're facing the Keystone Cops, you seem like a savant in comparison, and that's not. Now, understand, I say that in the fact that you had such a change in technology between the Mexican-American War and the Civil War that you had no idea of the just how lethal standing, because you went from, hey, we stand about 250 yards from each other and we shoot at each other. We're going to be here a couple of hours before we start really inflicting casualties too. This is the Manet ball. The Manet ball is deadly and accurate out to 400 yards. We're now standing at 200 yards. A whole lot of us are going to die real quick.
So basically, World War I was the Civil War, but even worse when it came to that clash of technology and older tactics.
One of the ways that we won the Mexican-American War was with our flying artillery, and we would just have the artillery come up to 40 yards. Within 40 yards of the Mexican infantry. We'd be shooting at them, but not hitting, probably because they didn't want to. But a crew-served weapon wipes these guys out. You try that against the rifles instead of muskets, and your crew is all dead, the horses are all dead, and the cannon's sitting there, and it's like, I don't know.
We got these guns! And ammo! Take it off!
So let me explain. I'm going to give my explanation why Lee is a brilliant winner of battles. But what Lee didn't realize is it's not about winning the battles, it's about winning the war. And so they do the great thrust into Pennsylvania and into Maryland, and then there's the Battle of Gettysburg. Lee forgot why he was fighting at Gettysburg. The goal was him and Stonewall Jackson, who was dead by then, have figured out that the mini ball has made defensive warfare really effective. So the goal is to go and fight battles in which you are in place and force the Union to massacre itself by attacking. So this is the goal. The goal is literally to go up in the northern campaign and force a defensive battle. But then there's an accidental meeting engagement at Gettysburg. If Lee had remembered what his goal was, which was to win the war, he would have he would have withdrew after the first day at Gettysburg. But he got his dander up, and he's like, I'm going to win this battle. And in the end, not only does he lose the battle, and the Confederates can't afford to lose troops. The Union can. So he forgot his entire purpose, and he loses the battle. Let me give you some other examples, though, of disparate technology. And the first one I want to talk about is a battle that I forget the name of. It was fought in the 1850s. It's on the Great Plains. It's not very well known. By and large, it's mostly Crow with some Sioux there, including Crazy Horse, who becomes, as a young man, he later becomes very famous, mostly for what he does at Custer's Last Stand. And this battle, they're fighting the American cavalry, and the American cavalry has horses also, but they have guns, and they're much more disciplined. And there were medicine men among the Crow who said, you know what, we have prayers, and we have this paint you can put on, it will protect you. You will not be hit by the bullets. Now most of you go like, it could be, because what happens is you have about 600 to 800 on both sides. The Crow and the Sioux, they are like, we're going to win. We're going to kick ass. The blue bellies are going to get it, and they're all ready, and they're ready. And then the cavalry comes in. It creates a long line, and then for reasons that are really quite unknown, the Americans stop. They put their carabines back into their sheaths, and they pull out their swords. They're going to do a classic cavalry charge with swords. And then they start charging. And the Indians are like, this wasn't what's supposed to happen. My magic doesn't work against swords, and they break and run. And this is not
The medicine man was very specific.
White man's lead will not penetrate us. Steel, I didn't mention.
Slash your throat.
It is a funny story, but it really illustrates how different social, economic, and psychological systems are being harnessed to fight a war that you don't completely understand in modern context, our modern context. So you rely on power that you profoundly believe in, which is the spiritual power of these medicine men, and it doesn't work out correctly. Another example of complete technological differences is you look at the Zulu nation. So the Zulu nation in the 1860s, 1870s is a predatory empire that's conquered all the surrounding peoples. They're built on a social system that is fascinating, where Chaka has basically created a system where men are all organized into regiments, the women are organized into regiments, and they can't marry until they've gained enough battlefield glory that regiment is now authorized to take wives from one of the female regiments. And Shaka is dead by then, but there is then a battle in which the British, in an imperial move, are going up against the Zulus. So, well, actually, I'm thinking it's Swanda. The Battle of Iswanda, and you have this British regiment. It's well over 1,000 men. They've got guns. Unfortunately, the British Empire was built on a budget. And so one of the problems is that the quartermasters are personally, financially responsible for the expenditure of every bullet. So they issue some bullets to each of the soldiers, but even though they got more bullets, they distribute them. They bring them to the battlefield, and they're waiting here. And so you have a force of about 1,500 British soldiers, and 20,000 Zulus attack. And the Zulus, they have a weapon that's about this tall. This much of it is blade, and they're attacking, and the British are standing in line, shooting them down, and then they run out of ammunition, and they're like, we need more ammo, and the quartermasters are, you need to sign receipts, because otherwise... and
let me say that there was I think there was one case where one of the battalion commanders does shoot his quartermaster. I mean, he shoots him at this point.
There's evidence. So the bullets are in like big sardine cans that you peel back the tin cover, and there were examples on the battlefield of bayonets that had obviously been used to pull open the stuff. So almost every British soldier dies. The only soldiers who do not die run faster than the Zulus.
They're on horseback.
And they get there, and so this is a massive massacre. And then about 4,000 Zulus arrive at the battlefield going like, man, we missed the battle. So they keep on going, and they go across the river, and they come to a medical hospital called Rorke's Drift, in which there's about 130 soldiers. And fortunately, the soldiers, they get a message, hey man, your regiments are dead. And they spend enough time, they build fortifications out of sacks of grain. And this is a movie. Both of these battles have been made into movies. The first one was called Zulu Dawn. It's hard to find. The next one was a really big bestseller. It's called Zulu, and it was a big bestseller because it was Michael Caine's first movie, and more importantly, the British win.
There's a wonderful song at the end of Harley coming in.
I'm sure it was a popular movie to see the quartermaster be like, no, you have to sign the
So what happens is the next year the British invade again, and they invade with Gatling guns, and they just go out to the middle of Zululand, and they form a corral, and they set up their Gatling guns and all their soldiers, and they distribute hundreds of bullets to everyone, and then the Zulus attack, and they are broken because it's just a massacre. Now, I know this is really dramatic, and if you ignore the racial elements, even though the racial elements are actually very important to the arrogance of the British to assume that they could beat the Zulus. And in the end, they did beat the Zulus because they used their superior technology. And in science fiction, colonial wars are a staple, much to the horror of many science fiction critics and literature professors. But there is a difference, and the difference is also very interesting, especially when Earth, humans are the ones that don't have the technology, that they now have to figure out some tactics to fight back. And if I could go one other example, I'm sorry if I've taken up too much time. Harry Turtledove's short story, The Road Not Taken, is freaking brilliant, because he posits the idea that starship travel is actually a really easy technology and humans just miss it. So aliens invade and they land on the campus of UCLA. By the way, he was a grad student at UCLA at the time.
The UCLA is always in every single story he writes.
Well, he spent a lot of time there. And so what's funny is, what are they? They're essentially Vikings. They have swords, they have horse-like critters, they're going to conquer the next planet. And they run into the U.S. military. And this is, the U.S. military is like, why are they charging us with swords? Okay, let's shoot them. And so The Road Not Taken is literally, oh, we never invented starships. Now we have a starship, and we're like, wow, these are really easy to build. By the way, the starship is built out of wood. And it's a great reversal of all our assumptions about technological superiority and how technological superiority happens.
Okay, I want to flesh out a point that I think would be interesting. The world, basically a character development. We talked about how Hannibal was a great tactician, but he lost. What can somebody that is a great tactician and also a great leader accomplish?
Oh, so great leaders and great tacticians, the thing that you had to have if you want them to be able to affect change is they had to be part of a military that is forced to go through change. And historically, militaries don't go through change until they're like looking at their teeth in their hands saying, oh, I did not understand how I was going to get hit in the mouth like that. So you had to have a military even after that. So you want the military to get, the simplest way to do this is you want the military to get punched hard in the mouth, but not so hard they get knocked out.
Pass.
Yeah, Kasserine Pass, or quite frankly, see the Soviet Red Army pretty much from 1941 to 1943, just getting smacked around by the Wehrmacht, and then realizing, hey, all those guys we have in the Gulag that we threw, we shot her in prisons because of Tukhachevsky, maybe we should get them out. They seem to have some of this operational thing they understand, and then bringing them back. The primary thing, though, here is if you have a character who's a great leader or a tactician, you need to make sure that they can affect change either because the Army is smart and allows change. Another example of this is the Israeli Defense Force in the 60s with the Israel TAL, with the Armor Corps. And I'll get to why that can be taken to an extreme here in a second. But you need to have a mechanism that you explain that makes it easier for the reader who may not have any military understanding whatsoever to understand, okay, why is this military going through this change so quick just because the promised child has said, we need to make this change. You can't have it that way. Militaries are hidebound, terrible bureaucracy organizations, he says as he works for the military. But no, seriously, it's one of those things where you have to explain the change. You can't just snap your fingers and MacGuffin it.
Well, also, amateurs study tactics, professionals study logistics. So if you have your military genius, tactician, leader, he also has to either be a great logistician or have one, like George Marshall. And that was really his, and Eisenhower too. Eisenhower wasn't, a tactician by any means, but he was a really, really good pencil pusher. He was really good at that. And he said, plans never survive contact with the enemy, and they're almost useless. However, the process of planning is invaluable. So it's knowing where you're going and how to get there. That the specifics of how to get there, that particular battle plan, that's not nearly as important as knowing what you're going to bring to that fight and how you're going to get there. So if you're moving your technology forward, again, having the proper logistics to do that. You may have the greatest wonder weapon in the world, like the Germans did in World War II at the end, but they just, because of the bombing campaigns and whatnot, they didn't have the logistics to make enough Tiger tanks to make a difference, to make enough, V-2 rockets to, destroy London completely or things like that. They couldn't do it.
I'd like to share just one quick story. I spent 3 years in Korea at a combat communication unit. Everybody that went through that had to go through a 7-day course on site defense, and then after that, we plopped them in the middle of a forest with an asset. They built a site, and they had to defend it for 3 days. We would attack, we would do scenarios. What I always could pick up on was who was going to succeed and who wasn't, based off leadership. Leadership was always a big thing for me in the military. Officers come and they're great, they got great ideas, but when those ideas didn't pan out, the system, it crumbled, and they weren't listening to the people underneath them. The person that did the best, and I knew going in, we were in for, because we were on the team that attacked and tried to take them out. I knew going in, it was going to be rough. I didn't say anything because as a leader, I'm not going to be like, oh, yeah, we're going to get our asses handed to us. He was an enlisted person, master sergeant. Great leader. I had worked with him out in the field on some other projects, and I just knew that his leadership, regardless whether things went right or wrong, would overcome, and these people would rally and succeed, and they did at our expense. So I mean, that's to me just the leadership portion. When you start talking about tacticians and war, the decision makers, the people that are talking, that have to say, you go out in the woods and find the bad guys. Leadership goes a long way to being able to succeed with that.
I'll give you an example. George Washington, his score was about 4-8-1. 4 wins, 8 losses, 1 tie. George Washington's brilliance was not on the battlefield. He was sufficient, but not brilliant. His brilliance was keeping together an army that kept on losing. And that is almost impossible to do, and he was able to do it. And he deserves credit due him for that. In fact, Napoleon thought he was one of the great leaders in history. Not only because he defeated the British, though I think that was important to Britain, but because he could hold together an army. The most difficult thing to do is to hold things together in the face of defeat. The most brilliant military, in my opinion, the most brilliant military accomplishment in the 20th century was France holding its army together in 1914 against the Swedin plan. They had to withdraw in the face of successful troops, and they were able to hold their army together. That was an amazing accomplishment. You go like, did he just compliment the French? Don't we make fun of them?
Yes.
Well, to our discredit, yes.
The French are a tough out, pretty much, especially at the tactical and operational level. They'll get
So
credit for it.
we have 2 questions, one here and that guy right there.
The question is how. This makes brilliance, and this is honestly the best leaders, but how do you keep faith? How do you keep motivation? How do you keep them together?
You don't give up hope, and you inspire them, and you have disciplined troops that even if they're going backwards, they retain their cohesion as a unit, and they retain their obedience to their officers.
I think the first part is, so from your character level, who I'll assume is the leader, because they don't have to be necessarily an overall leader, but at the small unit level, as they advance, again, Sharp's rifles comes to mind, other famous fictional characters. You have to have the ability of a person to convince their subordinates to believe in them, and they also have to convince their subordinates to believe in the cause. Because when they come, and I put those in that order for a reason, is that when push comes to shove and shove comes to swinging, the reason why units break is at the small unit leader level, like your NCOs and everything else, you have a tyrannical leader, and then thing that comes to mind is Schofield's definition of discipline. I won't recite it, but you can look it up. But you also have and as a cadet, it wasn't when you're required to memorize that. as a plea, and you have to go ahead and you have to keep saying that all throughout. If you look at it and you internalize it, you understand that if you do not abuse your subordinates, if you convince your subordinates, I mean, and you should believe it first off, but if you can at least fake it, that you will go to the wall for them, that will be reciprocated. If your subordinates or the character subordinates are convinced that this person will literally die before they will allow them to die, you'll look them in the eye and with the honor thing say, before they are carrying you out of here, I'm going to be the first one to go. That will go a long way to how units maintain cohesion. You also have to have a system that fosters that. One of the comments I remember, and it's another thing they teach you as a junior leader, is that they had the story of there was a young lieutenant in Vietnam era, and he said to his NCO, he said, Sergeant, you've been in E7 for like 15 years, and I make more than you and everything else. And I have all these duties and different things, these things I get. And the crusty old sergeant looks at him and says, sir, just outside that wire, there's thousands of Vietnamese who are ready to kill us. The first time when that machine gun's thumped and we're all looking at you, what are we going to do, sir? And we're in that trench line, and you're the first one that says, follow me. You're the first one out of that trench. You will earn every salute and every dollar that you make. That is kind of what you go with the military psyche and everything, and how you maintain that cohesion to where it all goes to pot and you're running from the hordes. You're still able to punch the hordes in the face occasionally, and that also goes a long way to slowing them down. If they've chewed through 5 units, and they've gone through them like a hot knife through butter, and then the hot knife hits the cold steel and shatters, everyone else is going to say, okay, we just got our faces ripped off. Let's be a little more cautious in this pursuit, and that will buy you time.
Well, I was going to say, too, that one of the reasons Benedict Arnold is so despised in American culture is because he was such a successful soldier at inspiring American troops in the face of absolute disaster. The retreat from Quebec in 1775 was a disaster, but he kept a rear guard in place. In fact, that was where Washington got his fame in the first place, was at Braddock's defeat. He kept a rear guard intact so that the entire British army didn't get slaughtered. But Benedict Arnold, not only at retreat from Quebec, but also at Saratoga, he was everywhere. They said he was a salamander in a fight. And in those days, salamanders were considered very positive fighters. But Benedict Arnold, because of his inspiration, he was said to be everywhere. Wherever the fighting was thickest, there he was, inspiring the troops, telling them, do this, go get him, Tiger, all this stuff. And then when he, through stupid political machinations in Congress, got, rather screwed over and switched sides, it's like, you're our best guy and you switched? Oh my God, we hate you now. Which of course there's something to be said. If you want to have a good bad guy, I would be a really, really good bad guy. But,
who listened to his wife too much.
Well, there's that too.
But you're right. I was on a panel yesterday about leadership. Leadership's about buy-in. The people underneath you believe in you, like you mentioned. That's the make or break point. If your people don't buy into your leadership, you're going to fail. Versus one of the greatest comments somebody ever said was, if you were to tell me we're going into hell and we're going to kick Satan off the throne, we would be right behind you regardless. So that's just a great idea of buy-in.
Chesty Puller is a good example that gets that done, because I think that's a quote with him, is that's who the quote is attributed to. Right. If we had to storm hell with a mouthful of spit and a bucket full of water, Chesty would be who would fall into the gates.
Yep. Grab your sunscreen, let's go.
I know Caesar tended to really take care of his centurions, the guys that were.
Oh yeah.
He made sure they were well paid, well taken care of. How do you speak to taking care of your sergeants, the guys that are over, to maintain that cohesion?
You treat them fairly.
Yeah.
And you care, and you make them believe that if lives are to be expended, you're making your best effort to make sure it's as few as lives as possible.
Yeah.
Soldiers that decided that they're not cared for and that they're just expendable, they may still fight, but they're fighting because they feel they have no choice, not because that they care to do their best.
counterexample of this is the Italian army in World War II. The Rommel had the famous quote about the Italian army, and because they get derided a lot, much like the French did. I would say the French were just victims of geography. If Canada was Germany in 1940, we would have fallen in 6 weeks also. But the quote about the Italians was their army of lions led by donkeys, and that's pretty much. I mean, if you look at historically and everything else, that's accurate. I mean, the average Italian soldier would fight when pressed. The problem became his NCOs and his officers would be like, yeah, this is looking bad, it's time to roll, guys. And that, of course, had the knock-on effect, as I mentioned, every time you run,
and that is exactly the same thing that U.S. Grant said about the Mexican army during the Mexican-American War. He said their soldiers were brave and valiant, but they were led by incompetent officers who really didn't care. And so when you have officers that are absolutely unversed and uncaring in logistics, they figure, you got a musket and sort of a uniform, there we go, let's go. Like, you're going to feed us? No, we'll live off the land. Yeah, right, we're in a desert. So
eat cactus.
So having officers who care for you, they will expend you if they need to.
Yeah.
They care for you, and also they put trust in their junior officers and NCOs. They trust them to do their jobs, and when you are entrusted with that trust, most people will do their absolute utmost to fulfill that trust.
I just pulled up a quote by Alexander the Great. I'm not afraid of an army of lions led by a sheep. I'm afraid of an army of sheep led by lions. So that sums it up. Okay, I got one more question, and we'll open up to audience questions. And since we've got two alternate history buffs on here, I figured this would be a great discussion to have. Okay, the Art of War is pretty much required reading if you go to a war college. You're going to spend hours and hours dissecting, talking about it. At the enlisted level, it's always recommended reading. What if Sun Tzu did not write the Art of War?
I think someone else would have.
Some pain comes to mind. And when you say, what if he didn't write the Art of War? I mean, again, my favorite dead Russians, there. Vegetius is another one that comes to mind. I mean, there are other texts that come to, yes, Confucius. And there's other texts that have been written on war that probably would take up the oxygen that, the Art of War has in a room. I think that...
Xenophon.
Yes, well, exactly.
Here, let's have a bit more fun with this. Let's say those tactics espoused in there just never made it to the level that they did.
He didn't invent the tactics. He just codified it into a book.
Yeah.
People passed along this wisdom as you were being trained to be officers and as you were trained to be an aristocrat and engage in your main occupation, which was warfare. And countries that were better at training people through whatever system they had a tendency to be more successful. That's why nowadays every large country has military academies, because they do believe that education is really important.
I think and this is I'll go tangential. Sun Tzu didn't really become all that prominent because you had I think it's Victor Davies Hansen, was the Western way of war. You did have the Western way of war, and there's a Western way of war, there's an Eastern way of war, there's, if you go with the Wagley, there's even an American way of war. All these are things that there would have been, the space would have been filled by somebody. I mean, I think that looking at most militaries, especially in the West, Sun Tzu's a curiosity. I mean, he's on a reading list, but he's not. Again, there's just a lot of oxygen filled with the dead Prussian.
You're not going to read that and be a genius all of a sudden. There's other things that need to happen.
If odds are you're going to be, because I attended CGSC as a civilian. The Command General Staff College for the Army wasn't even really mentioned. They really focused on Clausewitz, which is why I can't get away from that man. I'm not a fan.
The Army's kind of Prussian.
Well, yes, and the other problem you have is Sun Tzu may not work in part because of the Westphalian system, which is basically Treaty of Westphalia after the 30 Years' War, when Europe looked up and said, whoa, that was kind of crazy, we're a little bit nuts there, let's not do that again, let's kind of codify how we do wars. states, not ravaging mercenaries, things of that nature. The Westphalian system and Sun Tzu don't really work because Sun Tzu was more of the warlord type system. And so there's not a lot of strategic thought and people and everything else where he's trying to, that pyramid, the composite or triangle rather. So
it's a good question to ask if you're a world builder, I would say.
Yeah.
Because, okay, let's take this foundation of this philosophy that we've had, and let's say a race never developed or learned from that. Where can we go? All right, let's open it up to questions. I would just ask, keep it a question, not so much a statement. So, I mean, like I said, these guys are very knowledgeable and very excited about what they talk about. So let's take the opportunity to...
I don't know if it's been talked about, but what about units like the Gurkhas? How do they fit in and how are they allowed to operate? I know there were stories of Germans would wake up and one man in a foxhole would be slit.
Well, that pretty much happens to Germans on every front. I mean, the Soviets would talk about tongues. The Soviets, literally, that's how they would gain intelligence. Okay, you 10, go out there to the German lines, come back with 2 Germans. Okay, why do we need 2? Because we're going to convince the second one to talk about what we do to the first one. Oh, okay. And they would go out there to the French line, they get into a platoon. I mean, I just don't know if they'd never had night security or it just got cold and people fell asleep. But time and time again, the Germans aren't done because the Soviets have managed to capture some lieutenant, and they managed to capture some MCO, and 1 or 2 of them is going to talk after everyone gets about 20 nailing pins put in his head. Actually, a questioning technique. So that's the kind of thing where the thing with the Gurkhas is they're elite because that's their culture, and at the tactical level, that there are some things you cannot mess with, and one of those is a warrior culture that just says, look, we're the baddest guys on the block. You might defeat us, but it's going to hurt. I mean, these guys are taking the queen or the king or queen's coin. King or queen says, y'all got to die. We'd really prefer if you guys surrendered, but if you don't want to surrender, hey, that's cool with us.
And we like to fight. Well, also, there's a lot more applicants for those regiments than there are places. So they get the best of the best. In fact, there's a great story from World War II. These Gurkhas, they volunteered to be paratroopers, right? And they're being told, briefed on, okay, well, we're going to jump out of these airplanes at, X height. And they said, well, isn't that a little high? We'd much rather jump out a little lower. Say, well, no, there's not enough time for the parachute to open. Oh, we get parachutes?
True story. Yes. True story.
So my take on the Gurkhas is they're just yet another example of an impoverished place that doesn't have a lot of economic opportunity. And so the economic opportunity they found was being mercenaries. Mm-hmm. And there are many cases throughout history of mercenaries. Even the Swiss are still mercenaries.
Yeah. The Pope?
Yep. For the Pope.
Yeah.
And you're like, the Pope? Yeah.
The Papal Guard.
They're mostly show, but...
1506 was when they were instituted.
Yeah, there's a variety of places that are mercenaries. And American history, weirdly enough, we often forget about them, but the Indian guides, which were so vital to the Americans winning the Indian Wars, they're effectively oftentimes mercenaries. Now, they're mercenaries that are getting paid, but they're usually only willing to fight against mortal enemies.
Yeah.
And so, there was a lot of mortal enemies among the tribes, so that was easy to do. I just see Gurkhas as someone who has mystique built around this mercenary idea, and people love the idea of mercenaries. I don't know why. Well, because mercenaries seem to be cool, and you don't have all the messiness of what's your motivation for war. Even today, people are enamored with the idea of private military contractors, PMCs. I personally am unbelievably horrified because the last thing I want is fighters fighting for money. Because that's much more terrifying to me than fighters fighting for ideology or fighting for their country.
You talked about the Germans, how they would expend, calamitous amounts of resources on wonder weapons that didn't really do anything. A lot of you have served in the U.S. military. Do you fear that our own military is kind of doing similar things, spending tons of money on weapons and vehicles that are just not useful for the
difference is the U.S. economy's got the money. The Germans didn't.
And here,
so far. Yeah.
I can make your ears bleed by going through the acquisitions course I had to go through. Everybody groaning is groaning for a reason. I will simply say that the problem with the U.S. military and our expenditures in a large part is division math. When you agree to buy 1,200 of something and you lead a contractor to do R&D and everything for that 1,200, and then Congress changes hands, you now say we only want 600. Well, the cost is still at that 1,200 level because the R&D has still been paid for 1,200, and also Congress. And I say that, and again, that's the opinion of Dr. Young, not Mr. Young who works for the Army. This is Dr. Young talking right now. If you look historically at, especially in the 40s or late 40s and 50s and into the 60s, of the distribution of a contract, of the subcomponents, you have 435 congressional districts. Your average military contract or system, I think, has parts in, I used to know the number exactly, I think it's 275 of them. So it's very hard to kill a program because the last thing Congressman Jones wants to do is go home and explain to the, albeit a small number of people, maybe like 500 who got fired because they don't produce widget X, is that, yeah, I got rid of widget X because, quite frankly, we don't need this plane anymore. I mean, the F-35 comes to mind.
And the research and development, I mean, from an Air Force point of view, working with the Air Control Squadron, we had a radar. It was huge, bigger than a billboard, and we spent millions of dollars maintaining it. When I see movies where a guy puts out a suitcase, flips it open, and he's talking to the whole world. So it always comes down to, like I say, it's the cost. Is it gonna cost us more to buy a new system, or can we pay less and keep maintaining the old system?
The military-industrial complex is a real thing, regardless of what your politics are. It does not serve us well in terms of efficiency or in terms of
political and or strategy.
Wars are really expensive and inefficient, and the United States has essentially been at war continuously since World War II. Even though you don't think of it as being war, we spend money as if we're at war, and it is very inefficiently done.
It's on a credit card, too.
So my question is a little more speculative, but we kind of talk about like your motivation for fighting a war, whether it's to conquer cities or get prisoners or slaves. And one thing I was thinking about is Genghis Khan and stuff. Like he would destroy cities and people and leave them just complete rubble, so that there would just be nothing left and more grazing for horses.
That's because as a lesson. He only did that as a lesson so the next city would surrender.
So how I guess how do you figure out what would a culture's motivations be of what exactly they want by conquest?
Start with your ideology and work it down.
Friendship, women, loot.
Or that, and loot being not literal loot all the time, but literal like resources, whatever else. And to go back to the Genghis Khan thing, understand, Genghis Khan has a lot of that reputation because of a couple of incidents. Now, incident number one was when he went with the Han Chinese, and the Han thought, you ignorant barbarians from beyond the steppes, we are not going to do anything that you guys say. And he says, no, really, I'm not kidding. If you don't do what I say, I'm going to kill a lot of you. And the Chinese at that time, you didn't have that level of carnage. So they did not have a comprehension of Marco Polo's coming up to the city of Beijing, and he can literally, like, the road like 100 miles out is slick with human grease because of all the bodies they have stacked up.
Genghis Khan.
The second time was the Empire of Chorazin, where it was basically the two big, the quote Red Dawn, the two biggest kids are on the block, and someone's eventually going to take a fight. Well, the Emperor of Chorazin kind of took the first lick, but he didn't get a really good one in, because he sent back the head of the ambassadors, and then he blinded, one of Genghis Khan's prime ambassadors. Genghis Khan is kind of like, Don Corleone. He's not one of those people that you send a message to unless you really want to send a message to, and that's precisely what happened, and that's where he gets most of his reputation for the city built, you destroying everything else. He sent his son and his top general down there, and he said, go make an example. And you don't tell Subutai, and I can't remember his son's name, go make an example unless you want a whole lot of dead people.
What do you mean by the friendship line? Sorry about that.
Okay, soldiers fight for their comrades.
Yes.
They don't fight for causes. They fight for this. The male soldiers fight for the self-esteem and the esteem of their fellows. On the most fundamental level, that's why fighting happens. But why are they going to the battles? Throughout most of history, it's because they want women and loot.
Okay, can I say, I got one story I gotta tell here. Okay,
We'll get to your next.
we're talking about World War II, and we talked about Native Americans and whatnot. There's a great combination of this stuff and disparate types of warfare. What Bastogne, during the Battle of the Bulge, in the 101st Airborne, and I've gotten this from both Crow and Sioux sources, or Cheyenne rather, sources. There were these couple of guys, couple of Indian fellows in the 101st Airborne that were palled up, even though their people had fought for centuries, but they palled up. And they noticed that the Germans were using horse cavalry, horsemen, to patrol the lines. They went to their lieutenant and said, "Hey, boss, we'll go steal their horses for you if we get the okay." I said, "Okay, go ahead." So they brought back 50 horses. Right, they went on literally a crow raid. They got 50 horses, and they were really annoyed because their grandfathers told them that the U.S. Army would either pay them or let them have the horses. They would either pay them for each horse or let them have them. And the Army said, "No, you're in the Army. We're not going to do that. You don't get to keep them."
So you probably don't want this bag of scalps.
Sorry, but disparate types of warfare. These guys are going back centuries and moving forward with that. Anyway, sorry.
So for those of us who write fantasy, how do you guys like to see magic being incorporated into the tactics and how warfare?
As little as possible. No, so great fantasy uses magic very limitedly because magic should have extremely high economic costs. If it's too easy, then it becomes really irrational really fast.
I would argue the counter, and that may be incorrectly a lot of D&D, but which is I know. But here's the thing with that is that if you're using magic, your magic has to be consistent, and then you have to, going back to the resource part, you have to explain why isn't it on every store corner. Why isn't it used basically like we have the first mage platoon and they do all sorts of different things? I mean, once again, going back to Harry Curl level, the Bedessio's cycle, he limited the magic even though it was common. So you use it only for illusion or you use it to cause certain effects. I've seen good fantasy or a good fantasy has a lot of magic in it, but it's not like I'm throwing, these 20 guys are throwing fireballs and we're blowing our way through the castle. It's, we cause illusions, we inspire fear, we can cause battlefield effects with the weather and everything else. That is the type of thing you can do. It's not a primary weapon, it's a supporting weapon.
I think the cost is a great way to look at it. If you think of the Wheel of Time main character, every time he accessed the magic, something happened or he could have gone crazy.
I kind of wanted to build off his point with the fantasy. Could you have it be a major part, but maybe have like that one wizard or witch or whatever kind of be like a tank where the rest of the platoon is centered around them?
Magical recluse.
You can, but some people are going to counter that.
There's still a cost.
And people are going to basically, that guy's getting ganked when he sleeps, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, we're got another minute or two, and I want to give the panel an opportunity just to say parting words. I want to say thank you. Definitely informative. I took notes down. So, final thoughts.
Things to remember, real quick. Tactical Operation Strategic, and also DIME. DIME is an acronym the military uses for Diplomatic, Information, Military, Economic. If you're talking about war at strategic level, remember DIME. It's just a quick shorthand. For when you're building a world, you have to build why this nation is going to war and how it's going to war, and then how it affects things outside of conflict. By the time the bulls start fighting, you're probably going to figure things out by then. I mean, you know how this war is going to go.
What's the DIME acronym again?
Diplomatic, Information, Military, Economic.
We'll use this just to plug the series of a good friend of mine. It's called the Destroyermen series. Naval history, World War II. Taylor Anderson is a really great guy, a good friend of mine, and I highly recommend it.
Has the 11th book come out yet for that series?
We'll get that after. Go ahead.
I want to recommend a series of books that I think are very good portrayals of how to do warfare and how to do tactics. Joe Haldeman, Forever War, Robert Heinlein, Starship Troopers, Walter John Williams, the Praxis series, the Hornblower series by C.S. Forster, Bernard Cornwall, the Saxon Chronicles is a really good series also. And the last book I would plug is a book that I think everyone should read. It's a nonfiction book. It's called Guns, germs and steel like Derek.
Absolutely.
Hands down.
Okay, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks. You catch these guys in the hall.